Nina the Neurosurgeon with chronic back and neck pain. Nina was a Russian physician in her mid-30s completing her fellowship in neurosurgery. She had a thick accent and a stern bluntness about her that was stereotypically Russian. She was a lovely person, but her personality was as intense as her job, and her body reflected that fact. She complained of a 15-year history of right hip pain, intermittent low back pain, chronic tension in her shoulders and neck, and a very annoying pain above her right eyebrow. Nina was quite fit, worked out regularly, and spent long hours on her feet in the operating room scrubbed in on life-or-death surgeries. Her reality was an intense one, but she seemed to like it that way. As most doctors do, she talked to her colleagues about her pain and ended up coming in armed with an X-ray and MRI reports, and a collection of people offering to inject her with lidocaine, Botox, or cortisone. She was deeply ingrained in the medical model of addressing her pain, but didn't feel better, so she took the advice of one of the residents that I had treated and came in to see me. Nina was strong, relatively flexible, had good alignment and normal imagery, but everything seemed to hurt and she didn't understand why. She was used to outworking her problems, but couldn't get ahead of this one. She came in for her first appointment just after completing a 14-hour surgery with a team of doctors. The best way to describe Nina on day one was tense and tired. She described her pain in a matter-of-fact way, as a thing that she had compartmentalized to live with. She spent long hours on her feet every day helping other people, while her hip ached, her shoulders burned, and a nerve in her forehead yelled at her. I could tell that she was not in the mood for a discussion on the role stress played in her pain, so I opted to give her a superficial explanation of how IMS could help her, careful not to wade too deeply into the neuroscience which she might challenge and reject. She agreed to try it based partly on her confidence in me and partly on her confidence in her colleague that referred her to me. Nina's right hip seemed to be the issue that made her the most uncomfortable, so I focused on her lower body during our initial session. I explained that the deep rotator muscles in her hip were holding on to a lot of tension, which was compressing her hip and putting undue strain on the joint. I tried to stay within our common language of anatomy, more than our diverging understanding of pain. She was not used to being the patient, and the experience is different when the focus is pointed back at you. I had her lay on her left side. I slid her shorts down just below the bony prominence of her hip, and tapped an acupuncture needle into her gluteus medius muscle on the side of her hip. I then proceeded to slowly move it in and out, hunting and pecking for areas of tension in the large muscle. Nina immediately braced her whole body as she felt the intense squeezing and pressure of her hip muscle contracting strongly without her control. Everyone is different when it comes to their relationship with IMS, especially during their first treatment, because it can be both a physical and an emotional experience. The deep muscles of the hip can hold on to a lot of tension for a variety of reasons, but for most people it tends to be a combination of posture, stress, injury, or degeneration in the area. Nina's issue was 70% stress and 30% her posture during her long hours on her feet, but she wasn't ready to hear either of those explanations until I could make her pain go away, even temporarily. I proceeded to needle 4 of the deep muscles on Nina's hip, and I could tell that she found it quite uncomfortable, but she was relatively quiet and stoic about the procedure. She questioned why I thought it was a good idea to also treat the muscles of her left hip when that one didn't hurt. She was surprised to discover the muscles on that side felt as tight as her painful side. Nina left our first session with the good alignment and mobility she walked in with, as well as a feeling of being kicked in the butt that my treatment had created. She said, "Thank you, I think," and went home to lay down. She came back to see me 10 days later, and in response to me asking how she was doing, she said in a Russian accent, "I had intensely vivid dreams that night and was bitchy to my colleagues at work for 3 days. Oh yeah, and my hip stopped hurting for 5 days, but now it's back." We had a starting point and some proof that we could change her 15-year-old hip pain even temporarily. She had more questions about how IMS worked and wanted to know if we could make her hip feel better again, without the bitchy part this time. It was a good segue into why muscles hold onto tension, and a means of pulling her away from the idea there was something structurally wrong with her hip, an idea supported by the lack of findings on her MRI. I tried to bear in mind that I was talking to a neurosurgeon when I explained to her that muscles should have a certain amount of resting tone. They shouldn't be limp and flaccid, or relatively hypertonic and spasmed. Our nervous system is the electrical wiring of our muscular system and regulates the relative tone of our muscles, both locally and globally in our bodies. Nina was obviously very aware of how the nervous system worked, but was used to patients with more pathological conditions. I worked with people that had more subtle irritations that flew under the radar of medical investigations, such as those Nina undertook. I explained how most people have what I call emotional holding patterns that relate to their stress level and feed into their general posture due to increased tension in particular muscle groups. Some people clench their jaws, others tighten their stomachs, and many unknowingly brace the deep muscles in their butts. All are non-pathological effects stress has on your nervous system that doesn't require a diagnosis, but instead, an explanation. Nina listened to what I had to say, but was more interested in me taking away her pain than me telling her she was stressed. She didn't have time in her busy life as a surgeon to address her stress, but she could make time to see me if I could make her hip feel better. She came in to see me for IMS treatments 1 to 4 times per month as her schedule permitted. We expanded to treating her shoulders, jaw, and even the muscles above her eyebrow with great success. Her emotional reactions to the treatment diminished significantly, but I still felt like I was the steam release valve for her stress. In subsequent sessions, we talked about her initial emotional reaction and vivid dreams after IMS, and I helped to normalize that for her. We also discussed how her standing posture affected her pain. I helped her see the pattern between her pain resurfacing in correlation with events at work. IMS allowed me to tap into Nina's nervous system and calm down the tone in precise muscle groups, which made her feel better. But the real difference in Nina's life came from teaching her why it happened and giving her strategies to control it. I did an osteopathic manual therapy called visceral manipulation that helped her let go of the stress-based tension she held around her heart and lungs, and drew her awareness to how she breathed and stood during surgery. I continued to use IMS with her, but started layering on some physical and mental exercises that focused on how she held herself. As a result, she found she only needed to see me once a month instead of once per week. Once I showed her what her normal was supposed to feel like by releasing the tension from her body, she was motivated to listen to me and make mental time for the exercises and awareness I asked of her. Nina's pain issues, like most people's, are a result of both mental and physical issues, but in her case, the mental side was the driving force. It is a delicate exercise to explain to a stressed-out person that their stress is the root cause of their problem. You need to pick and choose your moments and create hope by means of thoughtful education and therapeutic intervention. Nina had the benefit of not finding the medical system itself a stressor, because she was very familiar with it. But many people with unexplained pain like hers get referred for tests and wait for specialists who end up compounding stress searching for a diagnosis or a structure causing the pain. In most circumstances, I find it is important to let the person tell their story about their pain their way, and then I help them discover that there are more layers to the issue than they first realized. Chronic pain is not something I aim to cure. It is a situation I try to help people objectify in their own bodies. I find that helping people better understand why their bodies feel the way they do can remove one layer of stress and make them more proactive at helping themselves. Stress is not always the driving factor in my patients' stories, but it is a common thread in most people's journeys.